Excuse me, I'm going to hold on to my mouse and my phone because I'm going to bore you with some stats in a little while. And unfortunately, my memory is not as good as it used to be, and I can't remember things like I said yesterday. So
what was it about information? We can only store now 4 pieces of information, short-term memory, when it used to be 7. So there's all these bits of information coming in that actually we can't retain.
The big thing. Features at the moment, I'm doing just to give you a bit of an intro, I'm doing a Google Squared course, and Paul and myself have been doing this for 7 months now, and the big push is big data, and how do we handle big data, and how do we process like that in terms to help us, and there's so much data that's there, how much information does that ultimately give us, and it's a really big topic at the moment. So that's another aside. That will probably be another talk that I do if I haven't bored you rigid by the time this one's over. But what I would like to talk to you, as Adrian said today, is content versus user experience debate. Now, there is a very sort of strong consensus that it was always content strategy. That was where you had to make sure that you had the right website content. That's not so much today. What we're all talking about is whether it's the user experience is so much more important as well. But what I am also going to talk to you about is you can have one, but you need to have both. And it's a little bit like in my household, pancakes are great, Nutella's great, you put the two together and it's absolutely fantastic. But if you put too much Nutella on, everything just goes to pot. So that's really what I want to talk to you about tonight.
Over the rattles outside. Is it a yacht or something that's
gone
by?
I know, it's very loud, isn't it? So it's all about actually formulating a content strategy. So what is more important? Is it content or is it the user experience? Well, that's all very well. It used to be that years ago everything we were pushing that content ruled, and it still does. That's very, very important. But you need to think about your long-term objective. And that's why when we come in as a web company to actually talk to people about their websites and say, where do you want to go in say 2 years' time? And it's get you there by not only looking at content but also looking to provide a seamless user experience. Now, in order to be able to do that, you need to understand exactly who your target audience is. And whereas it used to be the way that you had one type of audience, obviously that's not the case now. We've got to think about different user journeys. So if I go here, again, this is content is king, and this has been the byline for probably about 2 years now. But also you need other pieces on the board. You need web usability. You need to think about the interactive design. Are you going to give people a nice, enjoyable experience? Because you ultimately want people to come back. There's no point having a website that someone looks at and they say, well, that's okay, but I want to actually find out more. I want to come back and actually see how it's developed, how's it evolved. It's so important. And when you think about information architecture, what does that mean exactly? Well, that's the art and science of actually labelling a website. So that's when we look at the buttons, we look at how the navigation works, how much navigation do you put in that site, what do your call to actions look like, what colours are you using? All of these have such a key input into what people then feel about your website, and that they actually want to then come back. And you have to be up to date. You can't just say 6 months ago I've put a load of content on and that's sufficient, because it isn't, and we all know that search engines, and in particular Google, will penalise a site that isn't relevant and isn't up to date. Here's my first stat, so bear with me, bear with Paula. Okay, this one is by Sitecore. Now they did an experiment and asked marketers and end users, how important was it for you to have up-to-date content? And there was a 20% shift in rating, whether it was high or not, and whether it was worthwhile having up-to-date content. Which is mad, because it was the end user that was saying, I want up-to-date content. It wasn't the marketing department. So if you're not giving people what they want, then really you've missed the first trick. So that's what is so important, to make sure that you're putting good, relevant content on regularly. That is really, really important. have you got a content strategy? Well, I'm not going to read this out because it's pretty obvious, but what we're trying to do is, if you haven't got a content strategy, you can start thinking about a roadmap for the content that you want to apply on your site over a set period of time. And as a business, we all get busy, we can't do everything we want to, week in, week out. If you can actually, most business owners will say, I haven't got a content strategy and I don't know where to start. So if you can plan over the course of, say, a year, think about it as in terms of being seasonal, Christmas time, Easter time. What sort of content do you think you could plot over that period of time and make sure that you try to keep to that timetable? And as hard as it is, and we have the same issue in the SO, don't we? We're trying to keep content up to date, but at least it starts to get you into feeling as if you're in control. And this is what I'm hearing from a lot of clients, where they're saying to me, I don't even know where to start here. It's just too big an issue. So let's start small, start putting things into a calendar, into a diary, and then see what we end up. So how do you actually approach building a strategy? Well, this is probably the hardest point for people to actually try and get their heads around. And there was about 18 months ago, I suppose, I went to up at the Google headquarters, and it was for a meet-up with content strategists. I remember sitting there thinking, I don't know what I'm doing here, I don't know what who these people are. Most of them were journalists, but they knew that the web and the way that we had to present content was changing. And that was what's really hit me, was the fact that if you don't have a strategy and you're not thinking about it, you have to then try and put these things in place. So if you follow these, what I would say is probably the three main key points. Define your main themes and your topics, so decide what you want to say. Prioritise that message. So if you're a company of long standing, you've got a pedigree. Every time you put content out, reiterate you've got that pedigree. Make sure that your underlying message is saying you've been around for a long time, because the people that come to your site, or getting your newsletters or getting that content, will familiarise you with that ethos. And then you're building your brand, and your website is such a huge marketing opportunity for you that if you're not doing that, then again, as I said, it's so easy to keep that up to date and to do it that you're actually going to do yourself a huge disservice. Also decide on the length of the content. And this is quite important, because if you find that you've done analysis and you know who your end users are, if they're time poor, don't put a load of information on the site, on particular pages. Yes, on the pages of content that you want to rate highly for SEO, but not on every single page. If people haven't got time, you want them to make sure that they will come back to your site and carry on reading. And also sticky or slippery content. Slippery is the latest term. What we used to say was sticky in terms of you want people to find a page of content, like what they read, and go to another page and stay within your site. So it was actually getting that engagement and people finding content that was interesting and that was relevant. We haven't got the time to do that. What you want to do is to see if you can build on content that is slippery. Can you use that for a white paper, perhaps? Could you then condense that? And could you then put that into a Twitter feed or a Facebook article? Or could you put it on LinkedIn in a slightly different way with a different voice? But if you can re-engineer that content, and because we are all-time poor, we haven't got the luxury of having full-time content authors. So it makes more sense to see how much of that content you can actually re-engineer. And what type of content works? Some of you in the room have seen this, because this is my matrix that I absolutely love to death, because it just makes so much sense. What we're trying to achieve here, and this was first designed by Social Media Insights. So unfortunately we haven't actually put that down, there's sort of copyright. You have it, all right, that's good.
It's on here.
You haven't seen this, okay. But no, what we're actually trying to do is get people to think a little bit differently as to making sure that your content resonates on an emotional level. Ultimately what you want to do, you want to raise awareness, you want to get people to purchase, and by purchase I don't mean as in e-commerce or transactional. It's getting someone to do what you want them to do. That could be filling out a form or submitting to a survey. So what you're trying to do is get that someone to convert from the point of awareness to purchase. And if you can get them to actually, if you can communicate to them on an emotional level before they actually relate to you on a rational level, the hard work is then being done. And that is what is so crucial. So if you could pick out of all of these 4 boxes, one type of that content, then you know that you not only have you entertained someone, and I don't mean entertaining by standing up and doing a comic routine, but if you've got them engaged on video, you then educate them by giving them the actual data that they're expecting from you. Convince them by giving them the data or the case studies, which is really important. And reviews. I mean, you think about how important that when Amazon used to, they were way ahead of their time by saying, actually, we know that by putting reviews on the site, we're going to build that engagement and we're going to actually improve the number of transactions and the number of purchases that we made. I think they're absolutely right. Now, I tend to use Nike as an example for this, because Nike does absolutely everything, and most of the big multinationals have as well. But I think that still applies for SMEs. I don't think that's any different. And this is one thing that we try to do at MSO. If we can actually try and provide the content for all of those 4 boxes, then we're doing a good job. So before I go into sort of the user experience, it's now saying, oh, the content is great, now what do I do? Well, this is where you've got to make sure that what you're giving your users actually is aligned with your business objectives. So there's absolutely no point in saying, I've got a fantastic website, it looks good, but I'm not actually achieving what I want to achieve as a business. So it's really, really important that, and I can't stress this enough, that once you've got your content, make sure that's aligned with your goals. Make a list and a checklist of the goals that you're trying to achieve through your website, through your company, through your marketing. And once you've achieved those goals, keep on track that the content that you're providing is aligned still with those objectives. And also think about, refer to other sites when you're thinking about the content you want to put on your own site. Why do you like sites that you like? Is it because it's the content? Is it the user experience? Is it because it's a seamless experience and you're engaged and you enjoy it? And it's bringing all those 2 together and thinking about, right, okay, well, we can do the same on our site, but you've still got, at the back of your mind, I've got to make sure that that's achieving what I ultimately need to achieve from the website. And that is so important. So how do we define what a user experience actually is? Well, it's how people feel and what they think about your website. And it's looking at every single aspect on the site. So it's looking, as I said before, it's like looking at the buttons, looking at your colour palette, looking at where your calls to action should be. And this is something that I will cover when we're looking about mobile experience. It has to be obviously a seamless experience. It can't be too clunky. Don't ask people to go through with too many clicks. And that is quite a challenge in itself, because you do find that you have lots of content that you want to take people on this journey, but make sure that the information that they're looking for is in as few clicks as possible, and that is key. So in terms of really how we define that, you need to then think about the user journey, and this is where I will come up to, is talking about there's so many user journeys now, we can't just rely on that one to gain conversion. You have to now start thinking about lots of those journeys. So I have got what I think is a process to ensure success, and it just helps me when I'm thinking about what content we need to be advising people about to put on their site. And it used to be the way that building websites was the seller's market. We'd be able to say that, Adrian, right? That you could build a website according to what the business owner liked, and the website owner and their opinions, and I like that colour, and And we could then say, well, we could do something really fantastic and wow to support that, because we were showing off as well. And it wasn't as competitive as it is now. Everything has now shifted. It doesn't matter what the website owner likes to some degree. It doesn't matter what we as web developers want. It's what the user wants. And because we've got this complete shift, it's not a negative, it's just a different way of thinking. We've got to get into a different mindset now. So in terms of where we start at, let's have a purpose. What are you trying to achieve? Think about your audience. Who is your audience and how are we going to define them? Think about the content. Also think very carefully about the design and how you're going to put that content into as nice a design as possible. And then think about the technology that is going to support the content that you're putting up there. And I always think that simple is far better than anything that is too convoluted, because at the end of the day, you're looking at technology. People don't want to have to think too hard. So we have the ethos, don't make me think about it. If you're asking someone to think about what the next stage should be, you're not doing it right. As long as your technology is very subtle, then you will make sure that you're going to increase that level of engagement from your audience. And this is the bit that I love, and it is surprising how many of us don't actually realise this is going on, but it is. And if you read what Albert Einstein said, he's so right. We need to start really applying website logic to the emotions. And we all like to think that we're rational creatures, and we all say, yeah, when I'm researching something, when I'm going to buy something, I know that I'm making a rational decision. It's not true. And I'm going to give you another stat here, which you might be quite surprised about. Now, this is that a university in Virginia has worked out from studies that 90% of us decide on an emotional level to make a purchase before we've even read any of the details. 90% of us. That really gives you the answer that we need to be now thinking about website content and ensuring that it's engaging. And if we can then make sure that we've got people hooked from an emotional level, then we can start talking about the rational. But let's hit the emotional first. So when we think about telling a story, because we are human and we're all wired, we are not. If I were to stand up here and just rattle off a load of stats to you, no one would retain that information at all. We are not wired to take that information in that way. If you tell a story, so for example, on your website, you want to promote yourself as a company, you did X, Y, Z in a certain period of time, put that into a case study, and people remember the case study, then remember that, and then they will then by association, then say, okay, well you've convinced us that you know what you're doing. There was something that on the lecture a couple of weeks ago, on my Google course, and the lecturer was saying that at Great Ormond Street Hospital, they had all the kids that were wired up in critical conditions. The one thing that the head paediatrician was so worried about, he said, I've got these kids that have just gone through a nightmare operation, they're all wired up. Something is, we need to get them back on the ward, rewire them, and it's taking too long, it's too critical. He worked out that on average it took every child to rewire them, take everything out, put them back, get them back on the ward, took half an hour. Now, I would never have remembered that if I hadn't then heard him say that what Great Ormond Street did was they got Ferrari Formula 1 team in, the guys that changed the tyres and the wheels, and they said, what are we doing wrong? There's something, obviously, we need to cut the time down here, and this isn't working. They halved it, so it now only takes 15 minutes to get those kids rewired. Absolutely unbelievable. But again, it goes to say, you tell a story, you remember it. And it's so important. And so it's like understanding your audience as well. If you understand your audience, then you can make sure that you target that content for them, and then they'll come back and they'll engage. So what I'm going to show you now is some quite clever things, and this is part of what is called persuasion architecture. And all of us relate to this. It's the path of least, it says least effort here, but it's the path of least resistance. It is the make it easy for me and don't make me think about it. And the fact that I'm actually engaging on an emotional level means I haven't even thought about it at all. So the way we can get that on the website is, of course, your imagery, make sure visually it looks good, and have visual cues, whether that's implicit or whether it's explicit. And the next example I will show you is this website here. Now, they are renowned for being very good on having a stunning model with lots of jewellery, because the idea is you look at her first, but then you look at the jewellery, and what I think is very subtle. Look at her hands pointing. So you wouldn't even know that, but it's that, right, I know I need to click there. They've changed the font size, they've changed the colour, they've put it into capitals. But not only that, they then turned around and said that you're going to get 20% off anyway if you click through here. That, I mean, they do this, if you go onto this website, it's regular. They know exactly what they're doing. The one I saw before, they actually had a diagonal cut straight through the homepage, because it was we were looking at her, and then it was, there's a special offer here. It was very, very clever, but so subtle, you don't even know they're doing it. And this is another one, it's a heat map that's been applied to this ad, and the guy that's put this on his blog, he has studied this, and he has said, you've got to look at the baby. I mean, the fact that you can't see the baby's face really is irrelevant. The fact that baby on the left, because it's looking at us, that's where our eyesight goes, that's what we're looking at. No one read the message. No one looked at the ads and thought, yeah, okay, we know what they're talking about. When they changed it and had the baby pointing to the message, the amount of heat that was generated, so the number of users that then clicked on that message as a result of
red
that.
is the concentration of
That
users.
is, yeah. So it's just, sorry, I didn't explain that, but
No,
yeah,
no.
it's so subtle that you would not even, if we saw this one on its own, you wouldn't know until you had that as a comparison. It's very, very clever stuff. This one again, this is for a dating website. So we read first of all what the model is saying. Very, very plain, quite clinical I would say, but what ultimately they want to do, they want to sign up. They want people to go on and click on that form, and then we match it up and obviously pay an arm and a leg to sign up. But the directional cue is we're looking at, first of all, her, and then we're saying, right, I know someone needs me to put my details in. And everything else is very subtle, apart from this, I would say, but then that's what they're doing. If we go back to what we were looking at, the content marketing matrix, that's the reinforcement, that's the reviews, that's the, now we're saying, we've got awards for this, and we know what we're talking about, and we're a good site, trust us, and we know what we're talking about. So that's just to give you some idea as to how you can use it. Sorry. So when we're trying to think about, there is definite conflict between content and user experience, because you do find that people say that the content has to rule. What we're trying to do at MSO is to reduce that conflict. So it is very much about, you've got good copy, very good content. Think about whether on that content, sort of your headings and your subheadings, and make sure that when you are putting content up, don't conflict with SEO or the user experience. And you'll find that SEO strategists will say you have to have 400 or 500 page words on a page in order for the site to be successful. It doesn't always follow, and we try to have a happy medium between the two. It's just you populate pages that you want to rank well on search engine results pages and search pages, but also it's really quite key that you think about actually getting people to engage and get them to do what you want to do. So look at each page in isolation. Try not to have one home page and then a content template just showing your content. People get bored, they don't really want to see that. They want to have engagement and enjoyment every page that they go to. And then think about the look and feel on various devices, and you think about how a site should look on responsively. Does it scale down? Does it look good? where are your calls to action? If you think about what can look perfect on a desktop, once you scale it down, your calls to action are further down the page than they really should be. So if you want to get people to engage with you on social media, then on a desktop, we've got to start now thinking about putting those icons further up. If you want buttons, if you want someone to sign up to your newsletter, while it might look fantastic on your desktop, right down the bottom right, you've got a bit of extra space, that's the obvious place for it to go. That won't work on a mobile, it's got to be key, it's got to be up front. So it is trying to, almost, it's quite a challenge, just trying to make sure that you're keeping every device, you're aware of every device that you're actually putting your content on. I don't think I've got a stat for that one, but I just need to check, so possibly I'll do it. Bear with me. Okay. And one thing that we have done on MSO is that we now try and sit down when we're doing content, we sit with the developer, the content author, just to make sure that we are all working off the same sheet. And that is something that we've, probably over the last 6 months, we've tried really hard to make sure that our website, and since we have released the new site, is working really well because we all sit together and we work out and thrash out what is the best way to present that content. So how can content strategy benefit from UX and vice versa? Well, these are the 3 main benefits. Obviously, clarity and readability. Better information architecture, you're getting that, that's underpinning your content, so it's actually working for you. And this is where it's key, is customer centricity. It is now thinking about your customer, thinking about the journeys that they're taking, and ensuring that what you're giving them is exactly what they want. And because we are now, we're in the millennials age, everyone is more technically savvy and they're telling you exactly what sort of content they want, so you have to listen to the people that are coming to your site. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to go through each of these quite quickly. In terms of clarity and readability, how important it is to remember that people scan, we don't have time to read anymore. If you're going to write something and you want to make a point, don't put it at the end of the content. Think of it as an inverted pyramid. So your summary should be right slap bang at the top if you want to make a point. People will come back after you've done, after they've read that page, but if you have a real message, then make sure it goes at the top. Put meaningful headings. Also, I would say make sure that you put enough white space between your content that people are having, they need rest areas. It's really quite key that when your eye is being focused on one page, if it's copy, they're not going to read it, you want to put visuals in there, but also put a nice degree of white space in there as well. That is really helpful. And also pitch it perfectly. I don't know how many of you know this, but writing web content is quite an art in itself, and you have to appeal to a 14-year-old. So if a 14-year-old can't understand it, then forget it. Now there is something in Word. Anybody heard of the readability score in Word? You can actually switch. So it's a little bit where you have word count, but you can then select readability score, and it is something that is called the Flesh Reading Ease Test, and it counts up how many syllables in each sentence that you've written and how many words in each sentence. And if you have too many syllables and too many words, you will be penalised. So you want to get a score of about 60 to 70, but Word does it for you. It's there, but no one knows you actually to be able to use it, and it's quite a useful tool. It's just a bit unfortunate. So it's called the Flesh Ease Reading Test, but it's called a readability. In Word, it's called a readability score. Yeah, and you'll be able to find it, and it will go through. Just look up Word, just Google it. You'll be able to find it. So yeah, it's pretty important. So there's another stat that I've got, and it was by the Nielsen Normal Group, and they were studying how many people stay on the site once they've looked at your page of content, or 2-3 pages of content. They only stay around in total about 10 to 20 seconds. That's the only time that you've got left to make an impact. So when you think about the amount of content that you're putting on your site on a particular page, if they can't read it in 20 seconds, Is there any reason for you to be having it there in the first place? Possibly not. Information architecture. Just wanting to sort of go over this in a little more detail, because this is a benefit between content and obviously user experience. Having calls to action, as I said before, having them in key places. Colours, think about carefully. Also think about the mobile perspective and how they're going to look. And also the position. So as I said before, if you're going to look on your website from desktop down to mobile, sometimes there could be a really good argument for not having an image that's on the desktop on your mobile, because you're asking people to scroll. Do you necessarily, if you really want to put your calls to action right at the bottom of a long scrolling process on a mobile? But having said that, we all know to scroll. That's not the issue, and we find that developers and content writers will make sure that when you're asking people to scroll, that you've got visual cues as well. So just a few arrows here and there won't hurt. So now this part of my presentation, I'm going to talk about being customer centric, and this is where we've got some sort of new up and coming stats that are quite interesting as to why we should be customer centric. And it comes down to the user journey. People are finding your site through the day, morning, afternoon, at work, on different devices at different times. So you need to think very carefully about all the different types of journeys that they're making to find your content, and ensure that it's a seamless experience, as I said, as few clicks as possible and not costly. But this is something to give something first to get something back, and this is called conversion optimization. And if you want to try and build up a database of visitors to your site, you want information. Say, for example, you want to build a database for newsletter sign-up. If you give somebody something, they are more likely to say, okay, equal value, I'll give that to you back. And Gap is very good at doing that. They only ask, if you want to sign up to a newsletter, you only have to give them email address. That's all they want. If, however, you want to get 15% discount, their form is like that long, because they want to capture all of that information to be able to then retarget that audience at a later date. But they get it because they're giving 15% back. So there's the value proposition. I'm going to give you this and you give me that. And it works every time. So that's something that I would say to everybody that's got a website. If there is some way that you can get a bit more information to help you function as a business and to build up your database, then think about giving something to somebody for nothing. It doesn't hurt at all. And this is when I'm going to go on to Generation C. Has anybody heard of Generation C? So I told you. And
I'm just up to date.
I know. God, I'm so impressed with you, really. And Generation C, it's moved on. It's slightly different from the millennials. Generation C, 80% of Generation C are made up of millennials. These are people that have never known what it's like to never have had the internet. So you're talking about being born in the late 1990s, 2000s, and there's a bit of bone of contention. People don't actually know when it started. But I would say for most kids, they don't know what it's like not to have the internet. Millennials are very tech savvy. They tell you what they want, and you have to provide it, otherwise they won't come back. So these are the people that you really need to be thinking about. And they want, and I would say it's a mindset. So it's not a generation thing. It's not you couldn't say we're too old. I've got a phone, so I would be classed as Generation C. Anyone that's sitting here with a smartphone would be Generation C. But we are now, all of us, saying, I want to get involved in the creation of content, I want to be getting involved in connecting with people online, and I want a sense of community online. So it's, again, going back to what I was saying about emotional engagement, we are now all demanding so much more from our online experience than we ever did before. And you might be sitting here thinking, well, should I care? Well, yes, big time, because even in the States alone, these guys have got so much influence, buying influence. They account for $500 billion of sales turnover a year in the States alone. You can't ignore them. And you can't ignore us. This is what we're all demanding, really, as consumers. So this is Generation C. I'm going to go through what they're made of. So again, it's a state of mind. So 80% of millennials they make up YouTube's core, which is then a strong argument as to why you should be thinking more about video, because this is where these guys hang out. This is where we all put. I do. I'm at home and I've usually got YouTube going, cats and dogs and that sort of thing. And it's just something quick. Whereas I'm working, I've just got YouTube constantly. It's always up. And on Facebook, and if the girls at work share something on Facebook, 9 times out of 10, we're all on YouTube. We just, that's what we do. Paul, you sent around something yesterday on YouTube, and it is just, that's what we do now, isn't it? Quick 5 minutes. So this is where if your audience is here, this is where you need to be.
That's how you consume content.
Yeah, you do, because we haven't got the time. It has to be, video is so much more engaging, and rather than reading
That's
content.
one thing. Everyone here, 3 years ago, who used to buy a newspaper? Stick your hand up if you bought a newspaper. And now, how many buy newspapers? Oh, Sunday Times. Yeah. But that is how we consume information, isn't it? So maybe we're all entering that Generation C, because that's how we, the Daily Telegraph offers for holidays and everything. It's all changed, hasn't it?
Yeah. I think I probably read newspapers now to relax. That's downtime for me now. Whereas it never used to be. That was I wanted to keep up to date with the news.
But most people using newspapers are moving on to the tablet version.
Yeah.
You go on the trains in the morning now, more viewing tablets. Somebody was saying even Metro, the free London newspaper, is struggling with its free.
Seriously? That's interesting. So yes, it was Generation C strives for expression, and we can all probably relate to this. We want to put videos up of our nearest and dearest, videos, and this is important that 67% upload their own photos to social media network, and it's just a part of that's being wanted to be part of the community. And this is it's that social interaction. And I moan at my kids and say, can you talk to me? Can you get off your tablet? Can you get off your phone and just talk to me, just face to face? But is that just not me being a dinosaur? They are still socially I know, John. Thank you. Well, I do feel like a dinosaur. But is that such a bad thing if they are still socially interacting? Or do you disagree? Do you not think that they're interacting? If they're on their phones and they're talking to their friends, that's still social interaction, isn't it?
I called my daughter for supper the other night. She didn't come down, so I used FaceTime, and she answered it.
I said my daughter text.
What's all that about? She won't. You shouting, but actually use FaceTime. Yes, what do you want? Supper's ready. Why didn't you come down? But it's.
I got a text the other night that was. I looked at it. I want a hug. You know, you're next door. She really wanted to get off her backside. I said, Mum, I want a hug. So did you want me? Yeah, I want a hug. But that's her way of communicating. That's what she does with her friends.
Because communication like that is second nature.
Yeah.
Why not type it on your phone or do that? Because it's in the palm of your hand.
Precisely. It's
Why
easier.
expend energy
to
to actually do something or walk next door and find you're not there?
No, she's going to lose the use of her legs one day.
Where changes. It's not Generation Snail then.
And as I said before, that's 500 billion influence on spend. And Generation C is a tastemaker. If you think about its peer-to-peer influence across the likes of Twitter and Facebook, and stats do show that if someone is on Twitter and says, I endorse this product, their friends are more likely to follow. Same on Facebook. Say, hey guys, you've got to look at this, and they will definitely look at peers for that approval on whether or not they should convert him. So that's no different to a transaction. So it's like getting a buy-in for a website.
And it's probably why the students or children are moving away from Facebook, because their parents are moving on to it now.
Yeah, correct.
So they don't actually want to be on Facebook.
No.
Yeah. Because they need to get off there because their parents are crowding the space.
Exactly. Yeah, so this is us. This is Generation C. Generation C defines the social network. this is important. If your audience is on a social network, then you need to be on it too. And one really key phrase that I heard a while back was establish if there is a there. If your audience is active, and you can find this out on sort of the stats and the data, where are they talking most? Where are they being vocal? It could well be it's LinkedIn. I mean, for the Port of London, for example, we'd probably say for the Port of London, LinkedIn is going to be the best channel in order for you guys to actually find out who their audience is. But Facebook is something that we try to plug because we want to push our creativity. We want people to like us, and we're a fun group of people to work with. Facebook doesn't work for B2B necessarily so, but B2C, yes it does. When I work with the Aven website, which is high-end French products for women, and the amount of likes that they have on Facebook is absolutely phenomenal. And all they're doing is just getting people to talk about the product. They're not offering anything. Very rarely do they offer free products, because you can get that by the website. What they are doing is saying, we want to build a community and we want you guys to talk. We're just going to be the conduit. That's all we want to be, but we want you guys to actually engage on that side. So if you find out that your audience is active on Facebook, then obviously target them. But then there's no point putting content on there if they're not there, or it goes without saying. Just because everybody else is doing it on that particular channel doesn't mean to say it's right for you as a business. So that's one thing that we do try to advise people, and have a look around and see where everybody is talking most. And this is why video is so important now, with the fact that Generation C is using YouTube as its habitat for entertainment. And that is key, the fact that many of us really watch TV anymore.
The BBC Trust have recognised that actually they've got a huge problem, because there's the big thing about the licence fee, and we pay a licence fee now for terrestrial TV, which actually yes, we all have iPlayer. You don't need a TV licence for iPlayer, on your tablet.
Yeah.
So,
and I find this next stat actually quite important. The fact that YouTube has the same reach on the smartphone as it does on desktop, so you must think about how that experience is on a mobile just as much as how it looks on a desktop, because they've got both. So you can't afford it to be to the detriment of the other. You've got to make sure that you're putting content on there that is perfect on whatever device you're using. And this is what I can relate to. 91% of us sleep with a smartphone next to us. That is me, unfortunately. So Generation C still value relevance and originality, and what is quite interesting to note on this stat is that if you do want to put ads up, people are quite receptive to ads as long as the content you put up isn't too generic and it is relevant. So it's another way of thinking of, perhaps as a marketing ploy, should you be thinking about advertising on social media. We tend to boost posts. If someone is sharing an article, then the very fact that they're sharing it means that it's obviously something of real interest, so boost that post and broaden your reach. And that makes sense. So don't boost a post if no one's reading it. So if someone's engaging on a video that perhaps you posted as a company, then that is something maybe advertising across those channels is worth thinking about. And I'm drawing to a close now, but obviously remember the elephant in the room, which is Google. And we can't ignore Google. They're in the news today, aren't they? They've the EC statement of objection. Have you heard about that? Yeah. So they're in big trouble at the moment. But we have to think that in Europe, Google takes up 90% of the market share. So you have to make sure that you're putting good content on. It's like a baby. Your website evolves and it grows. You have to nurture it and you have to feed it, and you can't ignore it, because Google will penalise you if you don't. They are also going to next Tuesday, which is 21st, they've spoken about doing an update, and this update is going to be pretty fundamental. We don't know quite what, but the very fact that Google has actually said that they're going to do an update, most of the time they keep it very quiet and we don't know until after the event. What they're saying now is looking at mobile searches. What's the experience? Is your site mobile friendly? If you've done a search on Google, and if it's not, you will be penalised. So they're pretty cut and dried about it. It will happen. So you need to think, obviously, about making your sites responsive. And also think about how you are writing, how you're setting the tone of your content as well, because Google, they did a hummingbird update and they were looking actually at sites in context. So if you had a human element, if you was more naturally speaking the way if you write how you speak, Google rates that very highly. This is where it comes down to how do you write good website content, so write it as you speak, and this again goes back to making sure that you're looking at your readability score in terms of a 14-year-old. And also then also thinking about Google and how they're doing searches now, whereas years ago it used to be a few keywords, key terms you put in. Now we actually ask a search as we would speak. So if your site is actually answering that, then you're going to be higher up in the search engines research.
And for dyslexics like me, Google even corrects you.
So very finally, here's the to-do list. Offer information of value, think about devices and load times. And on a mobile, if your site doesn't load within 3 seconds, people will leave and they won't ever come back. That's 3 seconds, that's all you've got. So you've got to think about image size, which is going to obviously take up a huge proportion of time, isn't it?
There is a conversation now that actually mobile sites load faster than desktop because people's mobile home connectivity is better than at home.
Yeah.
You get 4G on your phone and you go home, you live in the sticks.
So it's also thinking about telling a story, as I said before. People love being the centre of attention. People like to be the subject of a story. So if you can bring that into your site content, that's fantastic. Be customer centric. And I think also what we're trying to do is by combining good content with a fantastic experience, you're going to achieve that your users become your advocates. They talk about you, they share you, they then get people to go back to your site, and it's you're just going to keep boosting traffic. So it's about giving people what they want. And the latest buzzword now coming from Google is that it's not digital marketing anymore, it's experience marketing, and that you're talking about what people want and how they get it, and that is what is more important than whatever we think as website owners. It's what the people want, and that's what we need to give them. So I hope that has helped. I try to think of content as the song. I was trying to think of a really good analogy, and what I could only come up with, think of content as a song. You don't need a full orchestra to keep that content looking fantastic. You just need one really good instrument that keeps it tuned. And as long as it's tuned, you'll have a perfect experience for everybody. So that's it. Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Have an enjoyable